Hello, everyone, and welcome to Becoming Nimble in the Next Normal, presented by Powerland and HPE, who have commissioned the expertise of IDC to bring you this webcast. We thank you for joining us. To begin today's webcast, we welcome Curtis Derry, Vice President of Sales and Strategy for Powerland. Next is Mike Hilton. He's the Vice President and General Manager of Hybrid IT Canada at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. Mike is also our host for today's event. Following Mike will be Dave Pearson from IDC. Dave is the Research Director and Team Lead for IDC Canada's Infrastructure Solutions Research Group. This group manages the Canadian Infrastructure and Platform as a Service program, as well as IDC Canada's enterprise storage and networking research. He will be presenting his research on becoming nimble in the next normal. Curtis and Mike will then join Dave in a lively and engaging discussion, building on the key points of Dave's presentation, as well as bringing in their individual perspectives. This will be followed by questions from the audience. Throughout the event, we would like you to join the conversation. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a box titled Q&A. If you have a question at any time, please click the Q&A box to submit it. After the presentations, we will spend a few minutes fielding your questions to the presenters. We may not have the opportunity to answer all your questions today, but rest assured that someone from Powerland or HPE will respond to your inquiry after the event. For those of you just joining us, welcome to Becoming Nimble in the Next Normal, presented by Powerland and HPE, who have commissioned the expertise of IDC to bring you this webcast. And now, I'd like to introduce you to Curtis Derry, our Vice President of Sales and Strategy for Powerland.
Hello, everyone. My name is Curtis Derry. I'm Vice President of Sales and Strategy here at Powerland. In today's current climate, many of our customers are facing new permanent norm, trying to implement infrastructure as a service, and Powerland has strategically partnered themselves with both IDC, a global thought leader, and HPE, a world-class manufacturer and leading edge to cloud provider. Together, this partnership has allowed us to gain the necessary insight to ensure we help our customers transform their business and empower their workforce. COVID-19 has accelerated the need for Canadian business to adopt a flexible, secure, game-changing solution. They need to deliver a true IT as a service and acquire the freedom to grow and position the business to the cloud. Through this solution, we're able to bring a cloud-like agility, simplicity into the data center through a pay-as-you-go capacity flex model. They'll enable and deliver true IT as a service, providing greater level of security with on-prem systems in your control, all the while of scalability, flex options, and cloud-like bursting. This webinar will provide you the necessary insights to set your business apart and put you on the path of a simpler IT, business agile, lower IT costs. As a value add, HPE and Powerland have partnered to offer a limited number of spots to attend a one-to-one executive conversation with IDC analysts in the weeks following after this webcast. Please reach out to my team at powerland.ca/IDC for more information. Thanks.
Thanks to Powerland for sponsoring today. I'd like to introduce Dave Pearson, Director of Infrastructure Solutions at IDC, to walk us through a discussion around becoming nimble in the next normal. If you have any questions throughout the session, please feel free to ask via the chat window. Dave, the floor is all yours.
Thanks for the introduction, Mike. And thank you to both Powerland and HPE for having me out today to speak about becoming nimble in the next normal. Also, many thanks to everyone who has joined today. My name is indeed Dave Pearson. I'm a Research Director in the Infrastructure Solutions Group with IDC Canada. And today I'll be speaking briefly about a few topics near and dear to my heart. Specifically, how Canadian organizations are ramping up efforts to digitally transform into a more nimble version of themselves, not just to simply survive the current pandemic and the resultant economic crisis, but to thrive in a constantly evolving and increasingly competitive global market. So I'm going to speak about what we've seen so far this year, how organizations are focusing their attention during the pandemic, what investments they're making in the way of digital infrastructure, and how companies like your own can best pivot in order to come out of 2020 in a safer, more nimble, more competitive state than you entered it. None of what I'll be describing in today's presentation is particularly cutting-edge technology. None of the trends I'll be speaking about started yesterday or last week or this year at all in reaction to the pandemic, But what is happening is that the trends that we've been tracking for the past decade here in Canada have just received an infusion of adrenaline. And in 2020, we're going to see actions taken on those trends and technologies that probably would have taken us an entire forecast cycle, maybe 5 to 10 years, to see happen in the Canadian marketplace. Shopify believes the office is simply not a thing anymore. Laurentian University President Robert Haché isn't sure that it can remain financially viable in a distanced digital world. And Scotiabank CEO Brian Porter believes that they need an entirely new paradigm for interacting with customers and employees. If these companies think the changes we've seen in just a few months will be the end of the old way of doing business and lead to permanent transformational change, you can almost certainly bet the same will be true for you, your clients, your partners, and your competition. So let's take a look at where Canadian organizations feel they currently stand in terms of the 5 stages of responding to the pandemic. At the midpoint of 2020, we asked about 500 Canadian small, medium, and large organizations where they felt they stood in terms of economic recovery and moving towards that next normal. About 34% felt that they were in a business continuity phase, responding to the crisis and just focused on keeping themselves afloat. Another 34% were in economic slowdown. They're in cost optimization mode, protecting capital. Only about 12% felt that they were already at the recession stage, which is prolonged economic decline and focusing on building business resiliency. And even fewer, 10%, were in the final 2 stages, the return to growth, where they're looking to aggressively invest, and the next normal, where they're working to operate more as a digital enterprise as they see it as vital to the success of their business. The biggest differentiator we see here is size. We're seeing successes and failures across all verticals and all regions in Canada, but if you narrow the scope to just businesses of 100 employees or more, you'll find that only a third are in those first 2 phases of business continuity and economic slowdown, whereas almost 40% are in operational resiliency mode, and a full quarter are in the acceleration or innovation phase. These are companies like TD, who invested in artificial intelligence software back in 2018 when it bought Layer 6. They've been able to predict which of their customers are going to go through financial hardships before even the customer knew. Or PC Express Online Grocery, that has seen volumes grow to 3 times the norm during this period. CIOs from our advisory board in other industries such as manufacturing, though, have indicated that they're in crisis mode. It's not the time for tech vendors to push new products to them as they try and make do with what they have, or that their focus right now is on operational technologies that will help them manage the crisis or generate financial outcomes in fiscal year 2020. Sentiment among Canadian organizations is not all doom and gloom, however. We asked those same respondents where they felt their organization would lie in 90 days, and you can see that over 50% of them felt that they would be in the return to growth or next normal economics phases, meaning that they would be ready for targeted investments and digital transformation into the future enterprise. A very small minority of respondents felt that they were backsliding, that things would be going worse for them by Q4 2020 than they are today. In fact, more respondents felt that they would leapfrog a particular phase and jump 2 or even 3 cohorts ahead. I don't think it'll come as a surprise to anyone to learn that COVID-19 is affecting ICT, information communication technology spend in Canada. Over 80% of respondents felt that it was going to impact their technology roadmap in 2020, and for the most part, that's negative. Under a Canadian-wide baseline scenario, 2020's ICT spend will decline far more than it did during the 2008-2009 global financial crisis or the post-9/11 dot-com crash. We're looking at an unprecedented 5.4% decline for the year for the combination of telecom and IT. About 15% of medium and large organizations indicated to us that they would be suspending projects and tech investments, while 85% are going ahead with DX initiatives with some refocus or review of investment. Essentially, prioritizing those projects that will help reduce costs and create operational efficiency, generate a return to the business in the very near term, 2020 or 2021, or provide a competitive advantage against competitors' weaknesses that will capture market share. So with a not very robust economy and ICT spending down, where are agile enterprises going to invest in 2020 and 2021? Well, we asked our survey respondents and they told us that their top 3 priorities were security, the working environment, and collaboration tools. Businesses are rightly focused on meeting their employees' and customers' most immediate needs as they adjust to the upheaval. Much of this investment has transformed and continues to do so. Security used to describe a small enterprise DC perimeter plus virus scanners and endpoints. Working environments meant the office. Remote offices stood up their own infrastructure and processed batches of data back to HQ. But with every individual becoming an autonomous part of the enterprise with access to critical data and resources, the threat surface of an organization can extend to thousands of endpoints outside of hands-on management and hundreds of applications under the control of third-party suppliers. Solutions that don't have end-to-end enterprise reach and visibility can only lead to increased management overhead and strain on already overloaded security resources. CIOs that IDC spoke to during our virtual roundtable last month said that while they generally consider their foundational work on risk prevention protocols to be what they need for maintaining the right control posture, they do point out that a 15x increase in cyber activity in Canada over this year implies a risk that has been exacerbated by employees' access through uncontrolled hardware and software. So COVID and post-COVID cyber imperatives may include even more focus on ways to secure remote access and devices. Beyond security, some important new IT investments that are being made by Canadian organizations are around collaboration for remote working. Connectivity is more important now than ever. Network architectures have been redesigned for many in just a matter of weeks. Speaking with the CTO for the Government of Canada, we learned that they're averaging between 2 and 6 million minutes of conference calls in one day, and I would be surprised if this is the first webinar that many of you have attended this week. Areas that will see decreased investment during this time include IT outsourcing, project-based IT services, and some emerging technologies. Infrastructure hardware and software, on the other hand, provides an interesting polarization in responses. While it was the spending category with the third largest group of respondents saying that spending would decrease, it was also one of the categories with the highest rates of increase, following only after security, collaboration, and cloud software. And this chart will explain to you exactly why that is. You'll notice the very small slice of green on the right-hand side. Only 2 out of every 5 Canadian organizations feel that their current IT infrastructure can both meet and exceed their current requirements and support next-generation workloads. An equal number of respondents feel that they're treading water with their IT infrastructure. They can support their current requirements, but they can't move ahead with next-generation workloads. And finally, that last 1 in 5 Canadian organizations cannot even do that. They're unable to support their current requirements, meaning they are not fulfilling the promise of IT to support business outcomes and create value within the enterprise. With 3/5 of Canadian organizations lacking confidence in their infrastructure to support DX and next-generation workloads, where are they going to turn? Can additional investment in the same aging technologies translate into business success? Well, probably not. Over a typical forecast period of 5 years, we see more than a doubling of storage capacity on average and more than 50% increase in compute capacity in the data centers of Canadian enterprises. At that same time, administration headcounts increased by 10%, meaning that Canadian DC admins are spending almost 3/4 of their time just keeping the lights on, rather than providing innovative solutions to create value within their organizations. So Canadian organizations were looking to cut costs, reduce total cost of ownership, have on-demand infrastructure with elasticity and agility, increase scalability and availability, add global reach to their current infrastructure, and make the most of best-of-breed technologies. What I'm showing on screen is, by IDC standards, very old data. In a survey conducted in 2019, we asked Canadian IT buyers what their current spend was in terms of deployment methodologies and what their projected spend was 2 years out from now in 2021. They knew that almost 2/3 of their infrastructure was being deployed in-house and wanted to cut that number down closer to 50%. Well, the good news is that they achieved that. We expect that side of the equation to play out exactly as projected by business executives. They weren't entirely right in where they expected those infrastructure dollars to go to, however. That traditional hosted and outsourced but non-cloud spending would be up, when in actual fact it was public cloud and hosted private cloud that absorbed those dollars. This new hybrid cloud paradigm and integration of cloud and non-cloud infrastructure inside and outside of the data center represents the next generation of infrastructure for Canadian businesses. So why is the hybrid cloud paradigm becoming so popular? Well, digitally determined organizations are more likely to prioritize better use of data for cloud-enabled digital transformation in order to achieve greater levels of resiliency, security, and without the increased capital expenses associated with legacy infrastructure. However, those priorities have changed over the years, and you can see that the number one reason is agility. Being nimble in the next normal is going to depend on the ability to get workloads deployed on the right infrastructure to have the data in the right place at the right time to support the right people in your organization. 2 industry examples in areas not known for their agility under normal circumstances have shown the benefits of hybrid cloud over the pandemic period. The Ontario Telemedicine Network was able to deal with a 4,000% increase in telehealth demand by bursting to the public cloud from their traditional infrastructure. And the rapid success of the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit this year leads Brendan Dunn from Shared Services Canada to fear that he's going to hear, "You got CERB done in 3 weeks" for the rest of his career. In our CloudPath study, we found that security was, by a wide margin, the number one key requirement of any cloud deployment. Interestingly enough, it was also the number one expected cloud benefit by a smaller margin, but particularly in private cloud environments. Self-service and workload portability are examples of innovative features achievable with public and private cloud deployments that help drive innovation and/or digital transformation in businesses. While cloud service providers have made significant strides recently in public cloud security and compliance, the perception of risk persists for many businesses in Canada, and for others, the reality is a need to maintain control overrides many of the other key benefits achievable from cloud. Management complexity, particularly across hybrid and multi-cloud environments, continue to worry Canadian respondents, and of course, downtime that cannot be remedied by internal IT staff is always an issue. So it sounds like cloud is providing many of the attributes that we're looking for in our infrastructure today, and it certainly seems to be growing in terms of importance in the Canadian ecosystem. But at the same time, we're seeing an increased level of maturity and understanding of what cloud really means in the data center for a lot of Canadian organizations, and almost 90% of customers repatriate workloads from public cloud. The reasons for that repatriation are primarily the concerns that we saw in the previous slide: security, performance, control. But there's also often a cost element, as workloads scale in the cloud in a very different way than they do in traditional infrastructure, and data ingress and egress charges can quickly add up over time. Of course, there are a wide variety of workloads that never make it to the cloud in the first place as well, for latency and co-location restrictions, for regulatory compliance or internal policy reasons. But many of those applications are looking for some of the same attributes that we get from cloud, just in a traditional data center setting. Organizations don't want to over-provision hardware when they're unsure of future demand and scalability issues. They need interoperability with respect to other applications and data sets that cannot be moved to the cloud. Or they have IP, skills, and expertise, especially in the form of individuals, that they're continuing to try to leverage in their existing data centers. For this reason, many companies are taking advantage of new consumption models being offered by vendors in this ecosystem, specifically as a service, on-demand, or utility-based pricing for traditional infrastructure within your own data center. While not perfectly suited to well-understood workloads with known utilization rates and defined schedules, this is an extremely attractive option to Canadian organizations this year, especially when really all future demand is up in the air. One of the things holding us back in our transformational journey to the next normal is the skills gap in Canadian organizations. It's been estimated that we're short about 50,000 full-time employees in technical roles across Canada, and no segment or industry is safe. We see large, medium, and small businesses missing skills in some areas or across the company at record numbers. And those top technical skill requirements, of course, circle around security and cloud architects and developers. Between this lack of availability of new resources and the fact that current technical resources are spending more and more time keeping the lights on, it's becoming very difficult for Canadian organizations to innovate and drive forward to that digitally transformed state that we're looking for. At the same time, 40% of Canadian companies think that they can hire for those skills, and that is simply not the case. Under 20% are seeking third-party expertise, but IDC feels that this is an area that we can improve in. A trusted third-party advisor that's been down the road of hybrid cloud installations, that's looked at new deployment models, that understands the availability of new consumption models being offered by traditional OEM vendors, in addition to the interoperability of those workloads on traditional hardware with cloud, can prove to be an invaluable asset to many Canadian companies. There are a variety of pitfalls and gotchas involved with every new IT initiative, and companies can avoid many of them by leveraging that expertise of those who have already navigated those waters. A trusted advisor with deep technical and industry experience has seen situations like yours, has dealt with security issues, regulatory compliance issues, internal governance issues, and can show you how companies similar to your own have dealt with these issues from the planning to execution stage, removing many of the headaches from digital transformation projects. That vertical expertise ties into the understanding of needs of new businesses and the opportunities that exist within IT modernization. The technical expertise speaks to assisting with best practices and understanding what's been done before and what works and what doesn't. For those reasons, quality of support is the number one criteria by which third-party partners are judged in Canada. The next four categories are fairly close together in terms of their importance to Canadian consumers, but you'll notice that competitive pricing is actually ahead of security and performance at this time. Not just the dollars and cents of the upfront price and the total cost of ownership, but creative and flexible pricing models are important to Canadian consumers. I don't think much needs to be said about security and performance. These are always absolutely key attributes among Canadian organizations. But that last point, ease of integration, should be looked at a little more closely. Protecting legacy investments and complementing the skills that are already existing within the data center and the IT staff of an organization is almost as important as the performance of the product themselves. As 2020 has reshaped many of our businesses, it's also reshaped the way that we deal with the vendor and partner community. The horizontal axis on this chart represents the overall importance of buying criteria, and you'll see that product reliability, customer service, and aligning with compliance requirements have always been key. But the vertical axis tells us how that's changed this year. And up at the top, you'll notice vendors' ability to deliver offering, their ease of doing business with, and most of all, speed of implementation are in the hot seat this year. Speed of implementation in particular is hitting that upper right quadrant sweet spot, showing once again that agility is that most sought after attribute in 2020 for Canadian businesses. When a proof of concept is not enough, vendors should be able to provide proof of execution within your industry on problems similar to your own, and reference clients willing to speak to the vendor's ability to deliver the offering in an easy way to do business with at high speed while providing good customer service is the gold standard. Making the case for system upgrades or replacements is never an easy job for an IT buyer, because there are always competing demands for investment capital within the organization. You need to highlight situations where legacy systems are preventing the organization from reaching its strategic goals. Analyzing the costs and risks of the legacy systems in the IT portfolio, including the risks of lost agility, missed business opportunities, poor customer service, lack of vendor support, and outdated skill sets, are all critical to this process. The modernization of systems needs to be prioritized based on business pain points, which right now often revolve around agility. As the CIO of a Canadian construction company told us back in May, IT has been trying to promote new platforms for years. Now business is welcoming IT innovation because it's keeping the business productive. This gives Canadian IT departments the opportunity to educate constantly the organization's financial decision makers about technical debt, the liabilities caused by outdated technology to obtain their support for funding IT modernization. Analyzing risks such as the lack of interoperability, inconsistent data, maintenance costs, security vulnerabilities, and outdated skill sets will drive this process forward. Deep integration with and buy-in from line of business is critical to make sure that this is an ongoing process, that infrastructure tech modernization is not a point-in-time purchase. Reinventing talent and processes does not mean hiring one new staff member or attending a course. And pushing out a new process manual does not mean you transformed your IT governance and operations. So just to wrap up some of these ideas in a single slide, whether your organization is being transformed by COVID-19 or you've been undergoing digital transformation because of business imperatives, the goal of that transformation is to come out in a better state than you went in, with data and capabilities everywhere they need to be, with security and resilience, and with agility and innovation. It's not simply buying technology to have the newest, shiniest object. The next generation of Canadian success stories will come from organizations that follow the workloads, that get the right data in the right place at the right time. And in IDC's view, this can be enabled through a hybrid approach to cloud while utilizing the expertise of trusted and experienced partners. IDC hopes for good health to you and yours, and that your organizations are successful in becoming nimble in the next normal. Thanks very much for taking the time to listen today. Mike,
Thank you, Dave. I'd like to bring in Curtis Derry now, VP of Strategy at Powerland. Let's continue the conversation around the transformation that's going on in the IT market and becoming nimble in the next normal. Dave, I'll start with you. Why are Canadian organizations perceived as to be lagging on transformation or adoption of new technologies compared to the US?
Thanks, Mike. That's an interesting question because we certainly do have that seemingly perception of Canadian organizations. And we are a conservative country. We don't like to be the first one to take a step on a new technology in many ways, shapes, and forms. But it's a bit of a false narrative as well. The prevalence of the hyperscalers south of the border really skews global cloud data. And in fact, we're actually seeing tremendous growth in Canada in cloud across all organizations, from public sector to retail to manufacturing and other technologies such as edge, which are finding their way in some of these fields as well. COVID has really accelerated that too. We've seen retailers go to the buy online, pick up in store model very quickly. We've watched public sector organizations such as Health Canada, Telehealth Ontario increase their capacity by 4,000% in a matter of weeks. We saw CERB get rolled out in a matter of weeks. These are projects that would have been impossible before. So while companies do like to play follow the leader a bit on technologies, and I do recommend that vendors and partners talk about their proof of execution more than their proof of concepts, to bring those companies together that have executed on digital transformation projects. I do think that the Canadian organizations are poised to make that transformational leap forward.
A great perspective, Dave. I definitely appreciate your context there. From my lens and the customer base from our side, I'm seeing the same things where people are realizing, what they have to do around being flexible and agile. And I think the, results given by HPE recently on their quarter validates that the adoption of GreenLake and the technology, the benefits it brings to their businesses by 82% growth that they had recently in their announcements. And so that's, the benefits that we're seeing and how we're helping our customers adopt this new as a service model and become more agile into the market.
Thanks, Curtis. Now, Curtis, well, digital transformation has been top of mind for many executives over the last few years. The current COVID-19 crisis is adding fuel to the fire. How do executives ensure workforce flexibility while still remaining agile and secure?
Yeah, it's been a challenge. I mean, when we look at it even from our own business, right, on how we have to adopt and be agile to the market, to the industry, and to our employees, right? Technology has moved at such a fast pace, and it's outpacing the capacity of resources, of people that we need to be able to help adopt some of these new technologies and how businesses work and function. And, for ourselves, being around 35 years in the IT industry, we've had to make, bets on both from a vendor perspective, resource perspective, and technology side on what's going to be, next in that market that we have to drive value to our customers. And, when we, look at our own strategy, we look at how do we apply that to our customers so that they can help adopt this and, realize the true benefits of having, a private consumption hybrid cloud model. And, that's how we've kind of adopted, our strategy internally and then push that out to market with our customers.
I totally agree, Curtis. And I think your question, Mike, is interesting that you mentioned remaining agile and secure. And that is a real priority for CIOs right now. We often tend to deploy first, secure later when we jump in with new technologies. And if you recall from my presentation a few minutes back, when we look at the trigger points for moving to cloud and the reasons why people move back off of cloud, often security is top of both of those lists. So the agility that people are trying to build into their enterprises right now have to be balanced by the security that they're building into their systems. So that holistic approach across the enterprise is really critical for companies to address.
And so in addition to security, clearly organizations have to modernize how they operate IT as part of this transformation. So how are Canadian businesses, Dave, modernizing infrastructure for a digital enterprise?
Well, it's a long, hard road. We have a lot of legacy infrastructure that we've invested in Canada that needs to be protected during this process. So it's not just a question of rip and replace with existing hardware. It's not just a question of jumping into new technologies, whether that be cloud, hyper-converged, edge computing, but really the transition is key. So it's developing new KPIs for what success looks like in terms of utilization of current resources and moving towards those new ones. It's reimagining our processes and our people, hiring for new skills, reskilling existing resources. We have a planscape for infrastructure modernization at IDC that has 7 key areas that we encourage companies to deal with. And really only 2 of them have to do with system deployment or system build paradigms. The rest of them, it's really a question of IT governance, creating that framework that's going to provide a structure for organizations to succeed, autonomous operations, real-time issues of visualization, and definitely the consumption model that Curtis mentioned a minute ago is a real key. The timing of contracts and the ability to free up CAPEX and manage OPEX for Canadian organizations is a very big deal, trying to transition from old school technology to new.
Yeah, to augment some of the points that you guys are making, I think, you always have to try and find some good within the bad. And I think that's what everyone's trying to do throughout this pandemic. And, it has caused, legacy process and obstacles to be knocked down and forced companies and leadership to think agile, fast, and outside the box to ensure that their businesses can survive. And with what comes with that is innovation, attraction to new talent, and then being able to be flexible and give employees what they want from a benefit of being able to work remotely and having that hybrid business model. And again, companies like ourselves, it was finding out that balance and making sure that it was successful, and looking at what new digital tools we can use and access to the right data and communication throughout the company, I think is part of that right recipe you need to be able to have that success. And I think now a lot of businesses are seeing those benefits of finding that flexibility and looking at how to attract that new millennial adoption of employees and stuff, so that they see how they can have that flexibility, and seeing that companies are innovating, right, versus looking at companies that maybe are considered legacy that they didn't see innovation from are now coming to the forefront.
So this is a great conversation on how this transformation is evolving and what we're seeing in terms of IT modernization. Of course, a big part of this is being able to support innovation and drive agility in the business, which is limited by some of these legacy IT models. In the next normal, I mean, obviously we're going to see businesses thrive who embrace that agility. Curtis, how does Canadian IT business and the market landscape build for success?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, the next generation of Canadian success stories will come from companies that, understand the right data at the right place at the right time, while ensuring how to make sure it's an operational model that can go with the flows of up and down volatility of the market and their business industry. Ensure that, top of mind around all this is security, right? We're obviously seeing a huge uptake in breaches that are happening, and with all this remote access and distributed data all over the place, how do you ensure the right, governance model and identity model around that to ensure your security and data is under control? I think that's a big aspect that people are looking to adopt. And, looking at these different models is looking at the areas you have to invest in. And, that's one area I like about the Green Lake is it extrapolates that hardware management layer away from the business, so now you can focus those resources on the key areas that they need to really focus on, whether that's the application layer, data, or security. And I think, looking at, the future, that's where companies will succeed, is looking at it holistically overall.
Dave, anything to add?
The one thing that keeps cropping up in our conversation is cloud, and IDC is a firm believer that cloud will be everywhere. But I want to make sure that people aren't conflating cloud with public cloud. I'm not just talking about the hyperscale deployments for public cloud environments. What we really mean is the promise of cloud, the agility within and without the data center to move workloads, to follow the demand wherever it may be. Whether it's our own employees that are driving that demand within our internal processes, our customers, our IT itself, hybrid cloud, which is extending through the data center to the public cloud, out to the edge, and encompassing all of our business models, is really the what we feel the dominant modality of the next few years of infrastructure success in IT. So finding the skills, finding the right people and the third parties that can help Canadian organizations build to that model and execute on it, defining the processes and the transformational technologies, and then training the people and making sure that that third leg of the data-driven enterprise platform is there to drive success for Canadian organizations is going to be key.
This has been a great discussion. I really appreciate both your perspectives. I know we received some great questions during the session. I've seen them come in, so let's go to those now. Who wants to take the first question? I think we're wanting to go to some questions, and so maybe we've seen some come in. Maybe Dave or Curtis, do you want to pick up any of the questions?
Sure, Mike. Yeah, appreciate everyone joining. And one of the questions I can take on here and get some opinions from both of you was, if I had to look at my overall IT budget strategically, where would I want to invest first, and specifically why? Again, from my perspective, when we had to all pivot 6 months ago and understand what this new strategy would look like, I think everyone's budget had to change quickly, right, to be able to enable and support remote users, understand how they can maybe set up some cloud and digital strategies very quickly as we all progress through this pandemic. And now going through the second phase of it, of this new normal, I think it's focusing on security overall has to be a key focus and investment area, because we know if data is breached or identity has issues, that's going to enable and shut down the business from significant impacts, and we're seeing some of those trends from that. I think it's just getting ready, as we all hear these trigger words around hybrid IT and cloud strategy and digitalization. It's just, at the end of the day, getting the businesses ready to adopt these new services models as a service. Because all the vendors are going that direction, all the technology is enabling for that, but how do you get ready for that on-prem? And I think that phased approach and what GreenLake can bring helps enable that. Dave, I don't know if you want to add any comments to that?
Yeah, absolutely, Curtis. I think the real question here is, where do people want to invest versus where people should be investing their IT budgets, and sometimes maybe where they're forced being invested. And the 5 stages of recovery that I talked about at the beginning of my presentation really informs that some companies are being forced to do the absolute maximum with what they already have in-house to achieve financial outcomes for 2020 and 2021, whereas others have a little bit of freedom in terms of their investments to try and demonstrate some digital leadership and get it ahead of their competitors. So absolutely, people need to be considering security at all times and in all ways. We do tend to be a little bit behind the curve in terms of securing as we deploy. It tends to be an afterthought, and it's often an expense for organizations. But beyond that, I think the infrastructure modernization to support those workloads that are going to help us, in a word, make money over 2020 and 2021 are going to be absolutely key. So the way that we interact with our customers, first and foremost, and how we keep our employees, customers, and partners safe through the pandemic. And then finally, what moves us to a more competitive future.
Yeah, thanks for that. Mike, do you have any comments?
No, I think you guys have both covered it. I do want to, just for those on the audience, make sure that people are aware of the Q&A section, and if there's any questions you'd like to pose, as we have both of our experts here today, feel free to add those questions to the Q&A section, and we'll get to those as we go through here. I know we have some more questions. Curtis or Dave, did you want to pick up the next one?
Yes, I see a question here about the breakdown of infrastructure modernization, talent reinvention, and governance. It seems like 3 very different groups should be involved in digital transformation, and who should lead, who gets a final say in these decisions. The digital transformation projects historically have been led by IT. The CIO in Canada is, in the very large majority of these transformations, the leader of these sorts of projects. We are seeing a bit of a shift in that, and we're often seeing that those responsibilities are becoming an innovation officer or a digital officer that's really outside of IT and more of a strategic role than an operational role. And I think for especially larger organizations that have the ability to maintain that kind of headcount, that's sort of the future, that everyone at the C level is responsible for innovation and transformation. And somebody outside of IT will sort of coordinate and lead, because really you're talking about human resources, you're talking about technology resources, you're talking about financial resources, and from a sourcing and strategy standpoint, you're going to be involving legal as well. When we talk to the CIO for the province of Ontario, the legal review of their projects is extremely intensive. So it's everybody's job. We do expect to see it still led by IT and the CIO in the majority of cases, but we would like to see that sort of advance beyond that kind of paradigm.
Curtis, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think I think Dave did a good job of addressing definitely all those. I mean, I think, is there any from the audience that we need to address, or any that came up anybody that wants to go live, or?
So we don't have any new questions that have come in. Maybe what I'll do is just turn it back to you guys. Based on some of those questions, is there any kind of final comments that you'd like to leave the audience with today? Maybe Curtis, I'll start with you.
I mean, I think hearing everything we're hearing today and understanding the pressure and innovation that everybody's under right now to figure out this whole digital strategy, this whole hybrid IT, and then you wrap around security around this is just not being afraid to reach out and ask questions, right? And, look at the expertise that can help kind of guide you through all this. We know that there's a lot of stress and chaos that everyone's going through. And, I think leaning on the right strategic partners and providing some of those technologies can help provide the outcomes that you need versus the pressure you're trying to take it on yourself. So I think that'd be the tidbit that I would lead with, is just don't hesitate to reach out. There's a lot of skills out there that are here to support you, and I mean, more information in regard to this is on our website under powerland.ca/HPE-GreenLake, and it has all the breakdown presentations and information there that can help kind of get you started internally.
I think that's great feedback, Curtis. Especially right now, as there's lots of new learnings that are showing up as organizations get involved in this. And so reaching out to organizations like Powerland to understand what they're seeing with other customers and how they can improve is a huge opportunity for our customers that are listening today. Dave, any closing comments from you?
Well, IDC would just like to thank everyone for coming out today and listening to our talk. I do think that we have a very uncertain time ahead of us through 2020 and 2021. And I would reiterate what Curtis said, that the availability of expertise is high in Canada, just not necessarily within our own organization. That looking outside to others where we've seen success stories already taking place in the Canadian ecosystem are great learning points. And the trusted third partners that are available, such as Powerland and HPE, can help companies navigate these waters. Thanks again.
Well, first of all, thank you both for doing this. It's been an incredibly valuable session. And as Dave said, thank you to all of you that joined today. We really appreciate the investment of your time in joining us in this conversation. And if you'd like to continue the conversation, please visit powerland.ca/IDC. Thank you and have a great day.